All right, thanks for tuning in here. I'm Barry Tonning, and we're going to do a short training video today on erosion and sediment control on home builder construction sites. We have here with us today a group of people from Lexington, Kentucky. We have Todd Johnson from the Lexington Home Builders Association, Jennifer Carey from the Division of Water Quality with the City of Lexington, Russ Wethington with Ball Homes, Greg Baker with Tobacco Rose Erosion and Sediment Control, and we have Kevin Lynn and Richard Lamy from the city's Inspection and Enforcement Program. And I want to start off by thanking Todd for our site visit here today on this construction site. And I know the home builders have done quite a bit on erosion and sediment control over the last few years. Why is this so important to the home building community?
Well, we're glad to be here today and be a part of this, and really thank Russell and Ball Homes for setting this up for us. As we know, we got over 250 active sites in Lexington right now with new home building activity, and something that all of our builders have to be in compliance with. And we're glad to be a part of this, hopefully as a training tool for those builders so that they know how to stay in compliance with all the rules and regulations they have to follow.
All right, well, thanks. We're going to take a little short tour around the construction site now and show you a little bit of what we're talking about here today. Before we get started looking at the site here, I wanted to talk just briefly about the rules and regulations that Todd mentioned. Jennifer, I know the City of Lexington was in a federal court case about their stormwater and erosion control program. Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Well, there's several reasons that we have these requirements in place for builders. The first is at the federal level, the U.S. EPA has stormwater regulations in place due to the Clean Water Act. At the state level, the Kentucky Division of Water has issued the city a stormwater discharge permit, and it has specific requirements in regards to controlling stormwater runoff from construction sites. And then the federal consent decree, which was an outcome of that lawsuit, is enforced by the U.S. Attorney General's Office, the EPA, and the Commonwealth of Kentucky, and it also has requirements in regards to erosion and sediment control and controlling runoff from construction sites.
So you have a lot of requirements you've got to meet, and you've got to report regularly to the federal and state authorities on progress on the program.
Yes, absolutely. We have to show that we have completed inspections on our end, and those inspections rely on inspections that the individual permit holders of land disturbance permits hold, and all of that gets reported to the EPA and the state of Kentucky on a regular basis.
All right, so let's take a look at how these rules and regulations are implemented out in the field, and we'll look at some of the aspects of this construction site. Jennifer told us a little bit about the permitting requirements. Can you just summarize what a home builder has to do to get a permit and start building in Fayette County?
Well, Barry, it's very simple. You have to develop an erosion sediment control plan that matches your topography of the site. That plan is submitted to engineering for approval.
Okay.
You get your permit. The BMPs have to be installed prior to construction and maintained during construction.
Okay. Now, do you send an inspector out to look at the BMPs before they start building?
Not on home lots.
Okay, not on home lots. Okay, so they put them in, and then they can start construction once they get their initial BMPs in.
That's correct.
All right. All right, thanks, Richard. All right, the first thing we're going to talk about is the stabilized construction exit. You can see here where we have the curb cut. There's a rock pad in here so that vehicles can go in and out of the site without depositing a lot of mud and debris on the road here. And if you notice about the rock on this side, these are big rock. These are good-sized rock that'll scrape the mud off the tires. These are not small number 57s. These are big number 2 style rock. You want a rock that's big enough to scrape the mud off and make sure you don't get any on the street. The bottom line on the construction exit is whether or not the pavement is clean. It's inevitable you're going to get a little mud out on the street, so every now and then you may need to do some cleaning of the pavement. The second practice I want to talk about here is the perimeter control. You can see on this particular lot we have a silt fence on the downhill side of the lot. Now you'll notice in the back of the lot where this lot goes up slope, there is no silt fence on the back of the lot. Water runs downhill. So you need a silt fence on the downhill side of the cleared area. You do not need any silt fence on the uphill side unless you have a waterway, a wetland, green space, or some other type of feature you're going to protect. Also, you're required to have silt fence. If there's an occupied lot with a home built there and you have people there, it's a good idea to have that silt fence there so that the people living next door aren't going to have any debris or anything blowing on their property. You can see the silt fence, the stakes are on the downhill side here, firmly installed. Silt fence is trenched in real good, and the idea is it's going to catch all the mud running downhill before it can come out into the street. On flatter lots, you can also use straw logs or wattles. Those have been popular in some parts of the country. They're using them in northern Kentucky. A few people are using them in central Kentucky, but for the most part we see the silt fence. You want to make sure you leave your silt fence up until your lot is stabilized. And stabilized means that you have your sod laid down or you have your lot seeded and mulched. The next thing I want to talk about on the building lot is trash and litter control. You can see that this lot was just cleared. We have our rock pad in, we have our foundation poured here. We don't have a lot of building materials on site, but soon we will. We want to make sure that as you have workers coming on the site with pop bottles and lunch bags and so forth, you have building materials, you have packaging and paper and bands and things like that you need to dispose of. You want to make sure that you have a waste container nearby. For this particular site, we do have a waste container, a roll-off down here that's serving several lots. You want to make sure that that's available and that your construction workers use it. If you have subcontractors on the site, make sure that they're using the waste container, and it's a good idea at the end of the day to take a quick look around and see if you have any litter blowing around, especially when you're building in an area where you have occupied homes and you have residents coming in and out of their cars. You don't want to have a lot of trash and litter blowing around. After 14 days of having your lot cleared, if you're not doing any activity on that part of the site, there is a requirement that you stabilize the lot. You can see over here on the adjacent area, we have some cleared space that we have mulched so that we don't get a lot of erosion from that area. Mulch can reduce the amount of erosion by up to 95%, just plain old mulch with no seed or anything. So where you have cleared areas and there's no active construction going on in that area for 14 days in a row, you are required to initiate stabilization on that part of the site. A few minutes ago I mentioned that soon on this lot we will have some materials delivered and so forth. One thing I want to point out is that if you have bags of fertilizer or lime or other materials that may leach pollutants during heavy rain, you want to make sure that you've got a tarp or plastic or some other way to prevent rainwater from washing pollutants out of that material and having that run off your site. Most of the time tarps are used or storing it indoors once you get the roof up and you can get that material out of the rain, but always be aware on your site of things that can run off with the rain and cause water pollution problem. Another thing that you probably will have very near your site, if not right next to your site, is a curb inlet. This is where rainwater runoff runs down the street and goes into an inlet, into an underground pipe, and usually into a small creek or stream right away. If you do have a curb inlet, there's invariably going to be a little bit of muddy runoff in the street. You want to make sure that you have inlet protection in front of that inlet, a small device so that storm water can pond up and drop out some sediment, or sediment can be filtered out before that storm water goes down into that drop inlet. So be aware on your site, look at the curbs, see if you have a curb inlet, and if you do, make sure you have some curb inlet protection in front of that inlet. As Jennifer mentioned early on in the video, there are some requirements for the home builder to do some inspections of their site periodically. Kevin, can you tell us a little bit about what those requirements are?
Okay, the inspection requirements are to inspect your site once a week and maintain the records, the inspection reports on the site, because that is one thing that the either local, state, or federal inspectors, whether it's Division of Water Quality with Lexington, Division of Water with the state, or the federal EPA, will come to the site and they expect to have those records maintained on site.
So they have to do an inspection and they have to have their inspection reports on site.
Yes, and
Okay.
and their BMP plan as well, an updated copy reflecting what is on the ground.
Okay, the BMP plan has to be on site, the inspection reports has to be on site, and I think the permit too has to be on site. Is that right? Those three things?
Yes.
Okay.
all three.
Now here at this site, we have a box out front where they have their inspection reports and BMP plans. This is very handy for the inspectors. They've got them sealed up here in plastic in case it rains. These will be protected from the elements. And you can see here that they have their plan showing their sill fence and so forth. They also have an inspection report in here. And you can see that these inspection reports are pretty simple. This inspection report here covers many weeks. And you can see for each inspection, for each week, you can see the time, whether they checked the sill fence, the construction entrance, the pavement was clean, litter and trash control, inlet protection, and then the signature of the inspector. So this is a very simple form to fill out. It doesn't require a lot of time at all. It is required to do this weekly, and it is required to be on the site. All right, we're going to wrap this short training video up now. Thanks again for tuning in. In closing out, I want to mention just a few key points that I hope you'll take home with you and remember when you're on your site. Number one, you've got to have three things on your site. You've got to have your inspection reports, you've got to have your permit, and you've got to have your BMP plan showing where your erosion controls are on your site. Also, once you reach final grade and you're done with active construction on bare parts of the site, you've got 14 days to stabilize that part of the site. Until then, all muddy runoff has to pass through a BMP. That can be a sill fence or other BMP, but you've got to have erosion and sediment controls on your site until you've got your site fully stabilized. And that means 70% grass cover or covered with sod. So those are the key points for your site. Good luck out there, and I hope all your inspections are good ones.